Hello, and welcome to Rotary Reads. I'm Dave Bennett, a member of the Rotary Club of Neepawa here in Manitoba, Canada. The official publication of Rotary International is a monthly magazine simply called Rotary. It is sent out to the 1.2 million members of Rotary worldwide every month in 129 different countries, and I think in about 25 different languages as well. This week we've chosen to get a really good article out of the October 2020 issue. It's about the Monarch Butterfly and the migration and some of the problems encountered with that and how Rotary is helping them. With me today I have Ivan Traill as well, and he'll get the program going. And welcome, Ivan, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, I think it's a very interesting article. It's not a lot about the Monarch Butterfly, but it's an awful lot about how Rotary is going to try to help the Monarch Butterfly to come back from, near extinction if you take the numbers into effect, like drop from 689 million in about 5 or 6 years ago to like 49 million now. So that's a big drop.
That's an 80-some% drop,
exactly,
isn't it?
And so some of the drop is because they don't have enough nectar around and so on. They talk in here about the pollination factor, but
yes,
they do that. That's the good part of what they do, is that they don't need the pollen at all. They're eating the nectar, but they're just pollinating things by the fact that they're eating the nectar. So, I think that people will enjoy the article because it's really telling about the butterfly itself and so on.
Well, I didn't know much about natural sciences, really. It's not my field, and butterflies in particular. So I found it very interesting and informative. I learned quite a bit about the monarch butterfly.
Yeah. This article is written by Frank Burris, and he's quite often a contributor to the Rotarian in the field of entomology and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, let's just read a little bit about it and sort of get into it, and then we'll discuss a few things as we go by just to add a little bit to it.
Sure, thanks, Ivan.
Late last winter, just before the world shut down, my family flew from Minneapolis to Mexico City, then drove 2 hours west toward the city of Valle del Bravo. From there, we continued on to Santo Pedro Heredia, a nature reserve situated in the forested mountains of central Mexico. The next morning, the sun rose behind the mountaintops. We began our hike up the mile-long trail. The air was cool, the sky was obscured by patchy clouds. Higher up the path, we noticed that the Oramel fir trees start to take on a different appearance. They looked solid. They looked so heavy that they might fall over. They looked like they had been colonized by some strange creature. When we reached the top, we could see that, in fact, it wasn't one creature that had colonized the trees, but many, millions of orange and black monarch butterflies covered the branches and trunks of the now orange-tinged trees. Huddling together for warmth as they had done every winter for thousands of years. When the sun emerged from behind the clouds, the insects warmed by the rays, filled the air, and the beating of their wings sounded like a soft rain. In a few weeks, those many butterflies would take off from these hills. Santuario Pedro Heredia is one of the handful of places where monarchs gather to spend the winter each year and fly to Texas and other parts of the southern United States, where they lay their eggs on milkweed plants. Those offspring would then fly north as far as Canada to lay their own eggs. After a third generation at the end of the summer, a fourth super generation, whose lifespan is as long as 9 months, as opposed to the predecessors, which was 2 to 6 weeks, would embark on a journey back to Mexico, following the Sierra Madre Oriental Mountains until reaching the hills of the Padre Heredia. So the first 2 generations that they talk about here are very short-lived. In fact, they eat they mate, they lay their eggs and die.
And then,
That's their sole purpose is to, and so that's anywhere between 2 and 6 weeks.
so they're producing the butterflies for the next generation to go ahead and do their little job.
Which is to fly a little bit farther north, yeah.
Okay.
The second generation is probably a little bit longer because they only do between 25 and 50 kilometers a day as the max.
Okay.
So it takes them quite a while to get from Texas up to Canada, say. So that generation has got to be a little bit longer. But then when they get up to Canada, they go through 2 generations. They go through the first generation, they lay the eggs. That generation evolves, lays its eggs again for the super generation, which is going to fly all the way back to Mexico from there in one flight and spend the winter.
And spend the winter,
in
and
Mexico.
then also fly back to Texas.
Exactly.
So they've got the big route going down and the first leg coming back.
Yeah. So there's two things that are necessary in each one of these stages. And one is they have to have food, which is the nectar, which is relatively easily supplied usually. It's getting worse all the time because the flowers are getting killed by herbicides and so on and so forth. But the big thing is that the caterpillars of the monarch butterfly will not eat anything except milkweed.
Just milkweed.
The only thing they will eat is milkweed.
And it won't matter which generation it is?
No. And it doesn't matter which milkweed it is. There's 100 different varieties of milkweed, which we have a beautiful milkweed here, big showy flowers on it.
In Canada?
It's called showy milkweed.
Oh.
But there's 100 different varieties of milkweed that are scattered through the United States, and it'll eat on any one of them, but only milkweed. So if they don't find any milkweed, that generation just dies out. It doesn't go any farther than that. So you can see why the generations, with all these things that they had to put together to make one trip, how it's pretty easy for one generation to get lost. In fact, the entomologists, and this is 30, 40 years ago, were really worried that the monarch butterfly might become near extinction just because of windstorm. You can imagine a heavy windstorm hits, and there's millions and millions of those butterflies are sent in central, and they go right down into Costa Rica. And
Well,
a
with
big windstorm hit, it could just wipe out millions of those things in one fell swoop.
And we certainly are having more,
Exactly.
acts of
Exactly. Anyway,
weather.
we're getting on to what Rotary does for them. No one knows how the instructions for this 6,000-mile round-trip journey, one of the longest known migrations for any insect species, pass from one generation of monarchs to the next. What we do know is that everywhere along this butterfly's route, the habitat it needs to survive is disappearing. The plight of the monarchs has made news in recent years. From school children to scientists, people are trying to help. Chris Stein, a ranger with the National Park Service, is one of them. In June 2015, Stein, who was then superintendent of the St. Croix National Scenic Riverway, invited Marlene Hargeluk, the incoming governor of the Rotary District of 5960, parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin, to park headquarters to discuss the loss of vital habitat for monarchs and other pollinators. Stein knew the power of Rotary to make things happen. Several years early, he had given a presentation to a Rotary Club of Stillwater, Sunrise, Minnesota, that led to the district signing a memorandum of understanding with the National Park Service. The result was a sister park project between national parks in the upper Midwest, in Costa Rica, and summer and winter homes, respectively, of birds that migrate along the St. Croix. The idea was passed on the International Peace Park, conceived by Rotarians in the 1930s, which unites Glacier National Park in the United States and Waterton Lakes National Park in Canada. It's one of the best known parks in the world that is run by two countries.
And we have one.
And we have half of it.
We have one close here in us in Manitoba as well.
Oh, yeah,
Between North Dakota and Manitoba, the Peace Park.
This is a very natural one, though, the one that with Waterton Lakes. In fact,
much bigger.
Waterton Lakes just hit the news within the last couple of years. A billionaire has decided to put a buffalo herd in there and leave them completely on their own, completely in the wild, to see if it won't bring back things like the insects and the birds and so on.
Right.
And he now has like 400,000 buffalo or something.
400,000?
Four parks. One of them is right here in Manitoba, up north of Winnipegosis.
Mm-hmm.
He's got 4 parks, and there's thousands of buffalo. He figures it'll take 100 years to bring it back to the way it was before the white man came. He's just leaving this large area, but they've seen insects that they thought were extinct show their heads because there's no insecticide. One of the things is the manure from the buffalo that some of them live on.
Right.
That was their food. Anyway, that was just a little aside, of course. But it's funny when you get people working on these things, how they interact with one another,
Well, all of natural science interacts with one another, that's for sure.
Exactly, yeah. At his office in St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin, Stein gave Garcolac a presentation on the monarch migration and showed her maps detailing the habitat loss facing the butterflies at every stage along their journey. And then he asked her, what do you think Rotarians can do? Garcolac's idea was to ask clubs to improve pollinator habitat in their own communities, or better yet said, let's ask all the clubs in all the districts from Canada to Mexico to each do a project. We can't wait until the butterflies get to Minnesota or Wisconsin to help them. If we're going to do the corridor, we've got to have everybody. We have to do a big project. Depending on the year, between 7 and 14 colonies of monarch butterflies overwinter in Mexico, partly because of habitat loss caused by illegal logging in Mexico's Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve, by modern agricultural practices in the United States and Canada, where corn and soybeans no longer share space with milkweed plants, by climate change, by pesticide use on farms in residential and commercial landscapes, and by urban sprawl and other development. Numbers have dropped from an estimated 682 million of the insects in 1997 to only 59 million last year. The western monarch population, which migrates primarily within the state of California, it just goes from Southern California to Northern California. Like that's its trip. It's a subspecies of the monarch butterfly. It's called the western butterfly. Western monarch, I mean. And but we're losing habitat faster than we've been able to put it back in. For monarchs, the habitat must include milkweed, the only plant monarch caterpillars will eat, and therefore the only plant on which the butterfly will lay its eggs. In North America, there are more than 100 species of milkweed, a tough plant that can grow in many places, pastures, prairies, gardens, roadsides, and wetlands. Other native plants provide the nectar that nourishes the butterflies themselves, ensuring that all the plants monarchs require are available when they need them. Will take a coordinated effort. In 2017, in a paper published in the journal Environmental Research Letters, researchers noted that the eastern migratory population of monarch butterflies declined by more than 80% within the last 2 decades. They estimated that restoring more than 1.3 billion stems of milkweed to the Midwestern United States will require participation from all sectors of society. Just an aside, since people have cut down on herbicides a lot in the area, the showy milkweed is showing up all over the place in our area, right in the area of Neepawa. If you go along the road, on the road between here and Arden, you will see the milkweed growing right up to the tarmac on the sides of the road. And if you go out into the area around Riverside Colony,
Oh, yeah.
it's where they built a new road there. And of course, milkweed is a bit of a primary plant. I don't know whether that means anything, but like dandelions and so on are primary plants. And then you get the climax plants, which, once everything is settled, grass will take over in most cases, unless there's, something breaking it up. That's why the buffalo and the milkweed were so good, because the buffalo, they rut and root around in the grass, and they always make places where the milkweed can grow.
And so on. Right.
Nowadays, it's along the roadsides and stuff like that, unless you actually plant a garden with it in there, which is what they've done.
So we can do some of this even in our own backyards and so on, to
yeah.
plant milkweed and so on. Like
it doesn't have to be that big.
It's
nice to have it big enough that they begin to know that it's there. Like, in other words, they come back to it. Because they came back for years to south of Brookdale and over into the I always want to say Mentmore, but it's south of Carberry. There's a little town south of Carberry. It's out in the bush, and there was lots of milkweed in there, and they used to come there, and the trees would just be covered with them. And in fact, Caldwell says, whatever people can do in their backyards is an important part of the solution. Just to answer your question. Stein, who now oversees the National Park Service's eight national heritage areas in the Midwest, agrees. No project is too small, he says. Someone planting one milkweed seed is good, but someone wants to go out and restore a prairie, that's even better. Restoring habitat will be key to the monarch's survival, but there are even bigger stakes. Butterflies aren't the only pollinators in trouble. So are bees and bats and moths and other insects. Researchers have found, for example, that native bumblebee populations in North America have declined 46% in the recent years. And the work these pollinators do has a direct effect on our own lives. 75% of the world's plant species are dependent on pollinators to survive. Says Stein, I ask people, do you like to eat? Without help of pollinators, he says 30% of the food in our grocery store would disappear. Fortunately, the same native plants that help monarchs also help bees and other pollinators. Monarch habitat benefits a lot of things, said Caldwell. Pollinator habitat is essentially about the plants and the ecosystem they support. Native plants support a higher diversity of insects which feed the birds, which feed the other wildlife. It's all about the ecosystem. Monarch habitat is wildlife habitat as opposed to lawns and monoculture crops. You want to read for a minute?
Well, sure, I can pick up a bit here, Ivan. The Rotary clubs along the way and so on were asked to contribute, weren't they?
Yeah, this is where the 63 clubs comes in. And
yeah, as such, she wrote to the governors of 74 districts across the Eastern Monarchs territory, asking them to do the same thing. And the conference that year for District 5960 included a sale of these pollinator plants. This lady, Gargulek, attended a meeting with the former U.S. Vice President, Walter Mundale. She was really going to the top there. Resident of Minnesota, her home state, at which they discussed ways to increase pollinator habitat. And then she got all kinds of organizations and businesses and so on to get involved. They got a $200,000 grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. allowing it to restore native habitat on nearly 1,000 acres of land, and a 5-acre seed plot for milkweed and wildflowers elsewhere, and different clubs got involved. Just move along a little bit here where anybody can participate, she said here, in Operation Pollination. A member of the Rotary Club of Hudson Daybreak got involved. Community members, Rotarians, businesses, organizations. The Pollinator Pledge has been signed by many organizations in addition to District 5960, and our club's almost 80 members, a good number, have participated in planting pollinator gardens. Some have also planted gardens at home. And at least 31 clubs in the district have carried out pollinator projects since 2015. Here was interesting. Rice Lake, Wisconsin, the city donated a plot of land for a butterfly garden and tree planting. I think of our plot of land up at the bike park north of town here that's looking for some vegetation, I'm sure, to beautify the place. We better get some pollinator type plants out there and help these the insects and so on. Anyway, they planted for a butterfly garden and tree planting. A member of the Rotary Club of Barron County Sunrise, Bruce Good, also hired a master gardener to design butterfly gardens in front of his Rice Lake restaurant. We have 2 butterfly gardens, he says. Once they're done planting, they just do their thing. It's pretty much self-sustaining. It's sort of like growing weeds, he says, which I'm good at. You just whack them down in the fall and they grow right back in the spring. So
there's a picture of his garden right there in the, you can see it there on this corner over here. He's got all kinds of beautiful wildflowers, and this is just out in front of his restaurant. Yeah. I think of the Barilla Garden just down over the hill beside us here.
Exactly.
What a wonderful place. Maybe we could talk her into just putting a corner of a couple of milkweed plants in there or something. And
maybe she's already got them.
oh, she might. Knowing her, she just might.
Knowing her, she might have. That's right. And it would be, it's a good project for Rotary clubs around the country. Really, you could get students involved.
Little kids can have a little garden, and
with COVID, we can't do an awful lot of getting together, but you can certainly plant your own little garden this spring, and with a bit of education and so on, it could help the butterflies and everything else out there that's looking for vegetation.
The thing is, that if you go to the Riding Mountain National Park, well, not the park, I'm sorry, it's outside the park. It's the spring and summer flea market.
Oh, yes.
There's often a guy from the park who comes out there and sells wild plants, wild flowers,
oh, does he?
all
Okay.
kinds of them. Yeah, and of course they spread out all of these asters that you have. They're beautiful flowers for getting pollen from the flowers, just like them.
Mm-hmm.
I took a picture of a group of, it's called, they're called many asters, just a name with thousands of them on one plant. While I was there, there must have been 10 bees and 2 butterflies on the same big wad of flowers at the same time. Yeah, so it doesn't take much to satisfy some of these things if you want to take the time and go on.
Well, should we just try and finish up maybe on the last page there?
Yep.
Ivan, you want me to continue? Or?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. With the district grant, along with funds from the city, a local watershed group, and nearby Rotary clubs, the Lakeville Club had more than $14,000 to pay for plant seeds, fencing, signage, and other needs. And in the summer of 2016, the Rotarians went to work preparing the site and planting the seeds for a dense patch of native plants, including wild lupine, trailblazing star, rattlesnake master, prairie onion, and butterfly weed, which is a type of milkweed apparently.
Yeah.
The city maintains the 8,000 square foot garden, and the air is filled with bees and butterflies all summer long. To date, much of the Operation Pollination activity has taken place within District 5960. That's at the northern end of the Monarch's route. This was in Minnesota there. Rotarians there want to work with clubs and other entities all along the migration corridor. Stein says that national heritage areas are a natural partner. these public-private partnerships have a total combined area larger than the state of Texas, and are run by local organizations with support from the National Park Service. Of the 55 U.S. National Heritage Sites, 36 have expressed interest in joining Operation Pollination. A dozen have already signed pollinator resolutions and are seeking partners for projects. Rotarians are perfect partners to sign on to the National Heritage Areas Resolution, to sign a pollinator pledge, and to do some habitat restoration, says Stein. And that would certainly apply here in Canada as well. Rotary clubs could really spearhead projects like this. Can you imagine, he finishes up by saying, if each district from Canada to Mexico embraced this idea? What if 1.2 million Rotarians in districts around the world pledged to do work on behalf of pollinators? Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be cool? He finishes that up.
The thing is that we are, and Wisconsin and ourselves, because we're in the end of it, we are in a special position because what they need all along the route are pollination type things. They need nectar. So it doesn't matter what you grow. You can grow as long as it's wildflowers and so on.
Right.
They will live on that and see them by. As I say, they fly all the way up.
Because you said they're flying like...
Up here, we need milkweed too. So we have to think in terms of not just pollinators, but milkweed as well. I noticed we're getting the high sign, so that you better wrap it up or we'll be in trouble.
That's
I can talk all day, you know that.
Well, I know you can. Initially, I forgot to say that you knew an awful lot about butterflies. You know an awful lot about everything that flies and everything else as well, Ivan. So you're a great host and guest to work with on some of these programs. So thank you very much for doing this today and joining us, and we'll work on some other programs in the future. But I'd just like to finish off then with the Rotary objects, as I did last week. The object of Rotary is to encourage and foster the ideal of service as a basis of worthy enterprise, and in particular to encourage and foster four things. First of all, the development of acquaintance as an opportunity for service. That's why Rotary tried to get people from all the different vocations, so you could become acquainted with different people all the time. Secondly, high ethical standards in business and professions, the recognition of the worthiness of all useful occupations and dignifying each Rotarian's occupation. And we certainly are looking for more Rotarians to join all the Rotary clubs across Canada and across the world. And if you're interested in service in your community or worldwide, we'd love to hear from you. Third is the application of the ideal of service in our own personal and business and community life. And fourthly, the one that it seems to tweak me because I'm interested in it, is the advancement of international understanding, goodwill, and peace throughout world fellowships. And there are many, many world fellowships in Rotary if you start looking into people that are involved, and you can find out an awful lot of other people like-minded like yourself to share your interests with. And finally, the four-way test that we like to apply to all the decisions we make. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendship? And will it be beneficial to all? So thank you for watching. And we'll finish up with the tune by the Saskatoon Nutana Club. Wrote just get the gentlemen's names here. I want to mention them. The composer of the tune was Stan Gorczynski, and the producer of the video was Jim Gillis, both of the Saskatoon Nutana Club, and of course it's their club that are participating in this. So thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? When we pay it forward, it will be returned. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned?